Greetings. This is Chapter 2, Strategy. For strategy, we're going to take a look at some of our objectives. I'm going to define operations and supply chain strategy. Also explain how operations and supply chain strategies are implemented. Understand why strategies have implications relative to business risk. And also evaluate productivity in operations and supply chain management. Also know what a sustainable business strategy is and how it relates to operations and supply chain management. Moderna's operations strategy is developing software for life. If anyone knows Moderna, that's the company that created one of the COVID-19 vaccines. Moderna has developed a radically different technology for engineering drugs called mRNA. It's a set of instructions by which cells make all proteins and send them to various parts of the body. mRNA medicines take advantage of this normal biological process. And Moderna has developed a flexible product development platform for producing this new type of drug, not only for COVID-19, but also for other illnesses as well. So, what is operations and supply chain strategy? Well, strategy is a high-level decision usually done at the highest levels of a company. And once a strategy is decided upon, then it gets implemented through an operations strategy by staff that is at a lower level. So operations and supply chain strategy is defined as the setting of broad policies and plans that will guide the use of resources needed by the firm to implement its corporate strategy. Corporate strategy provides the overall direction and coordinates operational goals with those of a larger organization. It can be viewed as part of the planning process that coordinates operational goals with those of the larger organization. Operations effectiveness is performing activities in a manner that best implements strategic priorities at a minimum cost. And the initiatives are the major steps that need to be taken in order to drive success in the firm. We'll take a look at formulating an operations and supply chain strategy. So, we have process and we have outputs. But before the process, we have to have strategic analysis. Then we have initiatives, and then implementation of the projects. So, usually the C-suite level players define the vision, mission, and objectives. Then they conduct the strategic analysis, and then they define the strategic competitive dimensions. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to handle what other companies are doing and respond to it? Identification of major steps needed in response to new competitive dimensions. Product design. Are we going to create or replicate? Create meaning creating our own products, or are we going to replicate some existing products that our competition has? And then what are the operation and supply chain initiatives? And then for the implementation of products, definition of specific implementation projects, identification of what resources are needed, and then how much is it going to cost, and where are we going to get the money for it? And then the outputs, as you can see, are right here. So what are some of the competitive dimensions? Well, price. Are we going to be known as the leader in price? You have companies in the grocery business, for instance, Aldi, and then you have Food Lion, and then I think Lidl is up here. But you also have a relatively new competitor up here who I'm very familiar with because I am from Florida by way of New York. Publix. Publix is not a grocery chain that is known for low prices. What they are known for is good customer service. So there are people who don't want to go to low-cost grocery chains, and they're not so interested in lower price. They're more interested in the service aspect of things. Quality. Make a great product or deliver a great service. Delivery speed. Make the product or deliver the service quickly. Delivery reliability. I know that my first week here at Carolina U, I decided that I wanted to buy pizza for lunch for the office staff here. And I called in at 11:10 and I said, could you please have this pizza here by 12 o'clock? At 12:30, I found out that they claimed that they got a bigger order, and they bumped my order, and they wanted to know if I still wanted the order when I called in. And I'm like, yeah, we're hungry and we're waiting, but you never called us back and never told us anything. And Pizza Hut is supposed to be famous for deliveries on time and that kind of thing, but I'll be honest with you, weren't impressed with their service and the delivery, and I probably won't use them again. Also, coping with changes in demand and changes in volume. If you are Anheuser-Busch and you have your Budweiser brand, you can see what happened with that brand when they selected a spokesmodel to represent the beer. It was the number one beer in the country, but after that controversy, it slipped down to number 3. And that certainly is going to negatively impact sales and profitability for InBev, which is the corporate company that represents Budweiser. Flexibility and new product introduction speed, change it quickly. There's one clothing company, I can't remember the name of it. It's relatively inexpensive. It's from Spain. But in any case, they are known for producing products very quickly and adapting to trends in the fashion industry. And they have the fastest turnaround time, so they're able to have products in the market while they're still current and they're hot. The name will come to me, but probably 20 minutes after I record this lecture. The notion of trade-offs. Management must decide which parameters of performance are critical and concentrate resources on those characteristics. A company can't do everything, and they're always competing projects. And the companies usually have to decide which ones they're going to invest in and which ones they're going to focus on, because resources are limited. And because resources are limited, you can't do everything that you want, and you have to pick and choose those projects which you think are going to give you the most bang for your buck and also give you the most sales and profits. For example, a firm that is focused on low-cost production may not be capable of quickly introducing new products. A strategic position, by the way, that company is Zara. I knew it would come to me, but I'm glad it didn't come to me after the recording was over. But anyway, the Zara, the Spanish clothing company located all around the world, is known to be able to react quickly for introducing new products, and that's what gives it a competitive advantage. A strategic position is not sustainable unless there are compromises with other positions. There's something called straddling. Straddling is seeking to match a successful competitor while maintaining its existing position. It's also copying. Sometimes companies get in trouble for copying another company's product, and you get into issues with trademark infringement, etc. I used to work for a company, it was called Fun World Easter Unlimited, and our competitor produced these Halloween lawn bags that looked like giant pumpkins when they were filled with leaves. The company I was working for at the time produced pumpkin leaf bags as well, and because the design was similar to theirs, my company was sued, and not only was it sued, but they had to they lost, and then they had to give the profits and the sales to the competitor who sued them, and they were enjoined from producing that product in the future. Very, very expensive proposition. So companies need to be careful when they straddle, because sometimes they're actually copying something. But sometimes if it's different enough, it will add to your sales because it has different features, services, or technology. But it often is a risky strategy. Order winners and order qualifiers. The marketing operations link. What is that? Well, a well-designed interface between marketing and operations is necessary to provide a business with an understanding of its markets. Order qualifiers are those dimensions that are necessary for a firm's products to be considered for purchase by customers. Features that customers will not forego, or companies that have these capabilities would qualify for consideration as possible suppliers. Order winners are criteria used by customers to differentiate the products and services of one firm from those of other firms. Features that customers use to determine which product to ultimately purchase. Strategies are implemented using operations and supply chain strategies. For instance, Zara can be the leader in the introduction of new products. Why? Because their supply chain is extremely efficient and they're able to turn around from the design of a product to actually delivery into its stores very quickly. Matter of fact, they do it better than any of their competitors. That's why they are doing so well. And they are usually at the forefront of fashion trends and are able to produce things quickly so that their customers can buy them, and they're also very reasonably priced. All operations activities relate to one another. It is linked. It's inextricably linked. To be efficient, the firm must minimize total cost without compromising customer needs. Activity system maps are diagrams that show how a company's strategy is delivered through a set of supporting activities. And that information is generally proprietary and is only available within an organization. If we take a look at IKEA targets young, low-cost buyers. It uses a self-service model showing furniture in familiar settings. It shows you what it looks like. They design its own low-cost, modular, ready-to-assemble furniture. It's inexpensive because it's not assembled. It's in a flat box, and you have to spend the time putting it together. I know I've purchased several things from IKEA, and the big concern I always have is I'm always left over with extra screws and nuts and bolts and whatever, and I always worry that the product is going to fall apart, particularly since most of the product they have is made of particle board wood. But they also stock the product in the boxes, and the customers go to the specific area in the warehouse and pull their own boxes. And they have in-store child care, extended hours, but they also have a very good cafeteria. I've actually had, I think, their Swedish meatballs there. Very, very good food, and it's relatively inexpensive. I did have a pretty poor experience there once when I went there to buy office furniture, and I completely outfitted my whole office. I worked with the salesperson. We picked the whole thing out, and then I was ready to get it, and she told me that it was 8 to 12 weeks out, meaning I had to wait 2 or 3 months for delivery, and that was really frustrating to me. I go into a store, and then I'm told a quarter year later I'd be able to get the product. That was extremely disappointing, and it was the last time I ever looked to purchase anything from that store that was substantial. But how do they create this low-cost furniture? Well, they cater to younger and not wealthy and have children. The products are low-cost, modular, and easy to transport. It's easy to transport if they have it in inventory. Suburban locations with a lot of parking, in-store child care, room-like displays, wide aisles to support high traffic, in-store warehouse. Self-selection by customers, unassembled furniture lies flat for easy transport, and minimum uses of warehouse space. They also have design staff focus on minimizing cost of manufacturing. Manufacturing also is done by their long-term suppliers who they've had relationships with, and the high level of inventory to maximize availability, although I did have that negative experience. They don't mention the restaurant or the food that's available, which I thought was a really good key feature, because a lot of times you get in there and you don't even realize that an hour or two is gone and you're hungry walking around that store. Have any of you purchased any product from IKEA? Let me know, and we can discuss that in class. Assessing the risk associated with operations and supply chain strategies. The recent COVID-19 pandemic has changed the global business environment, and I alluded to that earlier in Chapter 1, and highlighted the importance of adaptability and crisis management to endure radical changes. Supply chain risk is defined as the likelihood of a disruption that would impact the ability of a company to continuously supply products or services. The problem with sophisticated global supply chains is if you work for a company and you have a product that requires 15 or 20 different parts, you could be getting these parts from all over the world. And you can't assemble your product if you're missing 2 parts out of 20 and they're stuck in customs, or there was a civil unrest or war or disruptions in a country that you were getting it for. And it's imperative that if you are the supply chain officer, you better make sure that you anticipate these risks, because what did they say? Foretold is forewarned. You have to make sure that you put in Plan B and Plan C so that you're not caught short in getting your products, getting your parts for your products. If you are, you may be subject to dismissal from your company, because it's your job, if you're the supply chain manager, to make sure that you have all the parts necessary to assemble what your product is. In March 2011, a massive earthquake unleashed a powerful tsunami that shut down virtually all manufacturing capability in Sukagawa City, Japan. In 2012, excessive rain ruined the grape harvest for Nye Timber, an English winemaker. In 2004 and 21, oil tankers ran aground in the Suez Canal, blocking traffic through the canal for nearly a week. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina knocked out power and transportation routes along the Gulf of Mexico. And in 2000, a 10-minute fire at a Philips plant that supplied integrated circuits led to a $400 million loss. In 2014, an explosion at the Evonik plant in Marl, Germany, caused a shortage of a specialty resin called Nylon 12. These are all specific examples of supply chain risks that negatively impacted product delivery. Some of the frameworks, and this is what you have to do when you are putting together a supply chain, is you have to take a look at all the different risks. You have to identify the sources of potential disruptions. Focus on highly unlikely events that would cause a significant disruption to normal operations. A black swan event, a terrorist attack that was not anticipated. Look what happened in Israel in October of last year. Something like that they didn't anticipate. But in this day and age, there should have been a plan. You must think of the worst thing that can possibly happen and then plan for it. I remember that we had a storm on Long Island. I was working for a computer company at the time, and lightning struck the copper gutters. And the copper gutters actually ran from the roof, and they went into the warehouse down into the ground. But what happened is the electrical surge went from the copper to the steel structure of the roof, and the Cat 5 lines were running along the steel structure, and they completely fried the Cat 5 lines, and the Cat 5 lines were connected obviously to our servers and our routers, and they fried our servers and our routers, and we had about $60,000 worth of equipment destroyed. In addition to that, because our systems were down, we weren't able to ship customers for a couple days. I was very instrumental in recommending and suggesting that the company apply for a business interruption claim. And when the $250,000 check came, I asked the controller to give it to me so that I could give it to the owner of my company. And as I handed him the check and he grabbed it, I didn't let go of it, and I reiterated, I said, do you realize how much sales we have to do to make $250,000? The point is, I wanted to make sure that he understood that we were prepared for this unexpected event, and that we actually were able to recover from it, and then we received compensation. So we had risk management in place, and we were able to replace the parts, and we didn't have to pay for them. But you've got to do everything in your power to assess the potential impact of the risk and be prepared for it. Make sure that you have the proper insurance. Make sure that you have the proper plans to bring in alternative suppliers. And you have to develop these plans to mitigate the risk. A detailed strategy for minimizing the impact of the risk could take many different forms depending on the nature of the problem. I know that when I make arrangements with the trucking companies for shipping, I have long haul and short haul carriers, and contained within each one of those areas, I generally do what I call a 60-40 split. So I have two companies in place. I have one company that does the majority of the business and the other company that does the minority. And I do this because if the majority company at 60% falls down on the job, goes bankrupt, or is not delivering properly, I can bring in the one that's doing 40%, and they only have to come up 20% in terms of additional business, and that really is not much for a company to do. But anyway, this is a risk mitigation strategy to ensure that if my main carriers fall down on the job, I've got someone that we're doing business with, and it's just a minor increase in business for them to step up to be the majority carrier. And then I just have to find another carrier that does maybe the 40% of the business. So some of the risk mitigation strategies that we have here: natural disaster, alternative sites, relocate the company. This is particularly concerning in Florida, where you've got hurricane season every year, and you better make sure that you have an alternative operation to conduct business, particularly if a hurricane does happen. Country risks. Hedge currency. Sometimes currencies go up in value or down in value, and you have to hedge that risk by making sure that you handle it. Supplier failures. Use multiple suppliers. I just referenced that in terms of the 60-40 split that I have with carriers. I'll be asking you that question on a quiz, so keep that 60-40 issue in mind. Network provider failures. We recently had Microsoft had an outage, and there were thousands and thousands of flights that were canceled because of it. Then you have regulatory risk. Sometimes the federal government, they shouldn't do this, but they do. They pick winners and losers in industry, and sometimes a regulation comes through and it negatively impacts. We're taking a look at TikTok. We've seen a threat from the government that they must sell this company because there's a fear or concern that a lot of information is going back to China. Commodity price risks. We see the fluctuation in oil going up and down. Also gold. China is the number one supplier of rare earth elements. Rare earth elements are utilized in electronics, particularly cell phones and military equipment. And China manipulates and controls a majority of the rare earth elements and dictates the price. However, recently the United States discovered a large cache, CACHE, of rare earth elements in the Midwest, and that may be able to mitigate the Chinese control of that industry. So, more strategies here. Logistics failures, inventory risks, major quality failures. Anyone know of a company lately that's been accused of major quality failures? Boeing? Anyone Boeing? Boeing seems to have had a plethora of negative press due to the fact that a few of their products are crashing. That door that came off is something that reminds me of what happened. And then also theft and vandalism. When you have theft and vandalism, that takes away from companies' bottom lines, and you'll see the advent of thievery that's happening in many of the retail stores around the country. So much so that some of them are even closing the stores or creating barriers to their customers, putting product behind locked cabinets, etc., making it terribly inconvenient. Some states have passed laws that state that anything stolen under $950 is not a felony. And because of that, that's been leading to a lot of thefts in retail stores. So again, those are risks, and companies have to pay for those thefts that are going on, and that certainly decreases the bottom line. Here's a risk assessment matrix, and when you're looking at your supply chain, this is a helpful tool to figure out what's going on. There's something else called a heat map. And a heat map is similar to this matrix in that you take a look at what the risks are in certain countries that you're doing business with, and whether or not things are heating up in terms of becoming problematic. And you need to watch this all the time. You should have news feeds coming through to see if there's unrest or if there's any kind of regulatory issues that may negatively impact you. And then you should be able to dictate what other countries you should be doing business with in terms of changing your suppliers, so that you can have a finite amount of goods coming without any disruption. Productivity measurement. Productivity measurement is important. It's a measure of how well resources are used. So productivity equals outputs divided by inputs, and productivity is a relative measure, but it must be compared to something else to be meaningful. Operations can be compared to each other, and firms can be compared to other firms or themselves over time. Partial productivity measures compare output to a single input. Multi-factor productivity measures compare output to a group of inputs, and total productivity measures compare output to all inputs. So here's some examples of productivity measures or equations. You have a partial measure, output divided by labor, or output divided by capital, or output divided by materials, or output divided by energy. Multi-factor is you have the same output on the top line and then capital, labor, and energy on the bottom, or a total measure of outputs or inputs, goods and service produced divided by all resources used. What does all this mean? Well, we can take a look here. Examples of productivity measures, and here are the calculations. Input and output production data, $1,000. Finished units, you have $10,000 worth of finished units. WIP, or work in process, $2,500. Dividends, so the total output is $13,500. The input, labor, material, capital, energy, other expenses, so $13,500 divided by 15,193. Total output by the measures, 0.89. Then you have multi-factor. You can add that in, 4.28, 3.17. But what does this mean? Well, partial measures of productivity could be in restaurants. Customer meals per labor hour. Retail, common way of determining how good a retail store is. What are their sales per square feet? Chicken farm. Pounds of meat per pound of feed. Utility plant. Kilowatt hours per ton of coal. Paper mill. Tons of paper per cord of wood. A sustainable operations and supply chain strategy. The firm's strategy describes how it will create and sustain value for its current shareholders. Who are shareholders? Individuals or companies that legally own one or more shares of stock in a company. Stakeholders are individuals or organizations who are directly or indirectly influenced by the actions of the firm. Adding a sustainability requirement means meeting value goals without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Triple bottom line, I think we referred to that earlier, is not just profits, but it's also social, economic, and environmental criteria. Triple bottom line, you can take a look. It combines economic prosperity with environmental stewardship and social responsibility. Are they being good to the environment? Are they good stewards of the environment? Are they polluting the environment? Are they offsetting with carbon offsets? Triple bottom line, social responsibility pertains to the fair and beneficial business practices toward labor, the community, and the region in which a firm conducts its business. Economic prosperity means that the firm is obligated to compensate shareholders who provide capital, and the environmental stewardship refers to the firm's impact on the environment. Okay, and then we have our summary. Operations and supply chain strategy involves setting the broad policies for using a firm's resources. It coordinates operational goals with those of the larger organization. The strategies that are implemented through a set of activities designed to deliver products and services in a manner consistent with the firm's overall business strategy. Operations and supply chain strategies need to be evaluated relative to their riskiness and also their cost. Supply chain disruptions are unplanned and unanticipated events that disrupt the normal flow of goods and materials. However, a good supply chain manager is one who is planning and anticipating the unplanned and unanticipated. Supply chain coordination risks and disruption risks. And the last part of the summary, productivity measures are used to ensure that the firm makes the best use of its resources. A strategy that is sustainable must create value, and shareholders are equity owners in the company, and stakeholders are individuals and organizations that are influenced by the firm. This concludes Chapter 2. Thank you for listening.